Good morning. So what is this series exactly? Well, after my dozen or so times of playing through the Pirate101 story, I realized I haven't really ever read the dialogue. Sure, I know major plot points, but I was never enriched by all the dialogue and story this game has to offer. So that is what we're doing today, and for the next few months. I started a new privateer with the explicit purpose to read all the dialogue of the main story and truly learn why it is what we do. Sit back, relax, as we head into the story of Pirate101, experiencing the nuances you may have overlooked, and endure potential side rants about the relevance to today's world. If you like this format, please consider subscribing, commenting, and liking to show me you're enthralled by the Pirate101 story like I've been. Without further ado, let's sit by the fire and get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the I started a privateer to read all the dialogue in Pirate101. This is book 6, which takes place in Santo Pollo for the most part. And yeah, let's just get right into it. We start with speaking to this professor guy that Desmond Argoston told us to speak to. And he tells us to speak to the local friar, who is up here through these gates. And it's the friar that tells us about El Toro. And actually, there is a little puppet show for it. So let's get into it.
From the time of my grandfather, the humble village of Santo Pollo has had a protector. Banditos and corrupt governors, thieves and brigands, even the dread pirate Captain Blood, all have learned to fear the sword of El Toro. Cunning as a fox, silent as the snake, strong as the bull whose name he bears, El Toro has never been beaten and never wavered in his mission. He moves like a shadow at midnight, strikes without warning, fights with the strength of 10 men, and then vanishes like the wind. El Toro's greatest weapon is mystery. He could be anyone. He could be anywhere. No one knows what lies beneath El Toro's mask. How can you fight what you cannot see? Sadly, Santo Pollo still needs El Toro. Santo Rana's endless taxes sap the strength of our people. The banditos run riots in our streets, while the frogorales do nothing. I fear a storm is coming, and even El Toro will be hard-pressed to endure it.
So yeah, we basically get an introduction to who El Toro is, and so their sort of role in this ongoing conflict in Santo Pollo. And in the larger Cool Ranch, we see that these two factions of the Frogorales and then the Banditos, but they're kind of working in unison against the Santo Pollo people with endless taxes. And, you know, these guys aren't obviously in the wealthiest class except for Don Rodrigo, who lives in this manor here, who is, I mean, he doesn't really care about the taxes because they represent a small portion of his wealth, but the rest of Santo Pollo, those taxes are huge, and they are unjustified taxes because of Santa Rana. And speaking of Don Rodrigo, Friar Cluck here tells us to speak to Don Rodrigo as he is the best contact to meeting with El Toro. And he's not here now because of what we'll get to in later books, but you know, he stands here and he talks to us and he says that he'll contact El Toro if we can prove ourselves to be loyal to the Santo Pollo people. So our first task is to help this lady right here, Estela Castillo. She wants us to check if the church is safe because the night prior, El Toro had a big brawl with some guys in there. So we go inside, we check the church, we know it's safe, even if there's a little damage. And then we speak to the Friar Cluck, who is the friar of this church, and let him know that everything's all good. But our deeds are not done there. Friar Cluck directs us to Hector for a new need. Hector tells us that he was planning a wedding cake for a local couple's wedding, but the Banditos actually stole his sugar, so we have to go into the Skyway and sink some ships until we can collect the sugar that they stole from him. We return the sugar to Hector, but the conflict doesn't stop there. We actually have to help the bride-to-be's father with a conflict that's happening with the wedding, because as we can see her now, but this Serena lady was actually kidnapped by the Banditos. Our first lead in this case is to beat up a couple banditoads that are local in the area to see if they know where they actually took her, and they tell us that Fragovilla is the perpetrator of this heinous crime. And somewhere over here, I think it's this cave maybe, is the Fragovilla dungeon, where we fight a bunch of banditoads and we end up getting to Fragovilla, and we learn that Fragovilla is not even a frog; they are a salamander. And on Swashbucklers, you get this companion, but on other classes you don't. But they tell us that, you know, they're kind of a coward. They say, okay, you can have her back. So we get her. We essentially rescued her and then bring her back to the father. You thought that would be the end of the conflict, but something else has happened. The Don Oscar here, he tells us that the banditoads stole the strong box that held all the tax people's money. So all the money that they've collected for taxes was stolen by the banditoads and is hidden in Banditoad Gulch. So in Banditoad Gulch here, you can see the remnants of these towers because I've already went through the quest. But these towers are up, so we have to sabotage all those first before we can get to that tower in the distance you see there. So we defeat, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's 5 towers that we have to end up doing. And it's after defeating those towers, sabotaging them, that we can storm the main tower, which is up ahead. And this is actually our first instance where we see El Toro in the flesh, and we actually fight alongside him to defeat the guy that's in there. I was just standing there about to start the next part, and then I got pulled. Let's quickly do this. I should be able to kill him. And we can see the build in action. Look at that, that's flawless. Even though these guys are like level 15 or whatever, level 20. Alright, let's just cut to the next part. So the guy we fight in here is aptly named El Guapo, as you can see down here. And when we beat him, he actually escaped. So he runs away, and then we're left to talk to El Toro outside. And, you know, he's not here obviously now, because I'm later in the quest line. But we talked to him about Santorana and the whole predicament that Santopoyo was facing with the banditoads and the Fragorales. And it's here that Toro reveals that Santorana is the whole mastermind behind all of this. And he tells us that actually his palace is pretty nearby in the Skyway. So that is going to be our first step to rectifying and remedying what the Santopoyo people are facing. So we invade and sabotage this big house. We go up this tower first. It's an armory, and we sabotage a lot of the equipment there. But we learned that the Armada is actually helping Santorana, which is pretty interesting. So Santorana has made their way to Cool Ranch and is helping these local gangs and people of power sort of oppress the locals. And then after sabotaging the armory, we go straight through that door back there to face Santorana, and we fight him, and it seems like all's good, but he escapes once again. It's after that fight, as we're alone staying there with El Toro, that he gives us a letter to give to Don Rodrigo back in Santopoyo, you know, because they're friends, and then it is time that we head back to Don Rodrigo. Coming back to Don Rodrigo's estate, it is through that sigil where we have to speak to him, and you may notice that's a little weird. Why do we have to go through a sigil to speak to Don Rodrigo? And that is because of a very important thing to do with Santorana. So as we're speaking to Don Rodrigo here, you know, Don Rodrigo gasses up El Toro, but we're actually ambushed by Santorana, and it's here that Don Rodrigo has to reveal himself as El Toro. So Don Rodrigo, El Toro are one and the same, which is the reveal of the century. And then we fight Santorana once again. And this is the last time. This is the permanent time. And I'll just quickly go through this because I might as well. I might skip to the end, but let's see. You know, let's see if we get this Santorana's hat or his gun. That'd be kind of nice. Okay, nope, I just got absolutely nothing. Yeah, that's kind of that's the game. But it's after we beat that, we talk to Don Rodrigo, who is now revealed as El Toro, and he says that he actually doesn't know anything about Captain Blood because it was his father who was the one that fought Captain Blood. Don also explains that his father is now evidently dead, but his companion, his compadre, is still alive, and that is Tonka the bison. Oh, I am experiencing a connection. Okay, there we go. We're fine. Dawn directs us over to Eagle Collar in Bison Village to see where Tonka might be. It is upon setting foot in Bison Village where Book 6 ends and Book 7 begins. This one's actually pretty small scale and short. It's mostly just resolving that whole wedding conflict and then beating up Santorana and the reveal that El Toro is Don Rodrigo. And Book 7 and a couple of the later books start to get a little bit bigger in your ideas and the themes. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed Book 6, and I will see you in Book 7.